Thank you all for being here. You are all here for a purpose. You're not here to be entertained. You are here for a reason. I'm going to try to make that reason very, very clear. I want you to imagine that you're an obstetrician gynecologist like me. And I want you to imagine that you are a pro-choice obstetrician gynecologist like I used to be. Your patient is 17 years old. She's 20 weeks pregnant. Her uterus is all the way up to her umbilicus. If you could see her baby, and that's easy to do on an ultrasound, her baby would be the length of your hand. From head to rump, from your middle finger to your wrist, not counting the legs, that's a 20-week baby. She'd been feeling her baby kick for 2 weeks, but now she's asleep on an operating room table and you're there to help her with her problem. You walk into the operating room scrubbed and gowned, and on the right, there's a table with your instruments. The first thing you reach for is a suction catheter. It's about 11 inches long, it's clear plastic. Picture yourself putting this up through the cervix into the uterus and instruct the circulating nurse to turn on the suction machine. And what you'll see is pale yellow fluid running through the tubing into the machine. That was the amniotic fluid that was there to protect the baby. Now, if she were only 12 weeks pregnant or less, a 12-week baby is the width of your hand from head to rump, not counting the legs. You could pretty much do the whole abortion with this one instrument. Babies this big do not fit through catheters this size. So you reach for your Sofer clamp. It's about 13 inches long, it's stainless steel. The business end is about 2.5 inches long and 1/2 inch wide. And there are rows of sharp teeth. This is a grasping instrument. When it gets a hold of something, it does not let go. A second trimester D&E abortion is, the way I used to do them, a blind procedure. You don't see anything, you do everything by feel. So picture yourself taking this instrument, put it up through the cervix, be careful not to perforate the walls of the uterus, they're thin and soft, and then blindly grasp anything you can and pull, and feel yourself pulling, and I do mean hard. And out comes an arm about that big, which you put down on the table next to you. And reach in again, grasp, pull, hard. Out comes a leg about the same length, which you put down on the table. And reach in with this same instrument again and again, and tear out the spine, the intestines, the heart and lungs. Head on a baby that size is about the size of a plum. You can't see it, but you're pretty sure you've got it if your instrument's around something and your fingers are spread as far as they will go. You know you did it right if you crush down on the instrument and white material runs out of the cervix. That was the baby's brains. Now you can pull out skull pieces. Sometimes a little face comes back and stares back at you. Congratulations. You just successfully performed a second trimester D&E abortion. You just affirmed her right to choose. You just made, in today's dollars, over $2,000 in 15 minutes. Now, I graduated from medical school in 1976, and if you asked me at the time how I felt about the abortion issue, I would not have hesitated for a second to tell you I was pro-choice. This was a decision between a woman, her doctor, and no one, including the baby's father, had anything to say about it. You know, a lot of people identify themselves as pro-life or pro-choice. For a lot of people, it doesn't directly affect their lives. It doesn't even affect how they vote. But when you're an obstetrician gynecologist and you say you're pro-choice, this isn't just some vague political position. You have to decide whether you're going to actually do those operations. So right along with learning how to do hysterectomies and deliveries and all the things that obstetrician gynecologists do, I learned to do first and second trimester abortions. This was the late 70s. We had a clinic in the hospital that met twice a week. And if our patients were 12 to maybe 13 weeks from their last menstrual period in their pregnancy, we'd bring them back for suction D&C abortions. Still, about half of the first trimester abortions are being done by suction D&C. We didn't have medical abortions at the time. And believe it or not, when we did these in the delivery room, and when it was my turn to do them, I'd do 2, 3, 4 in the morning, never thought anything of it. If they were more than 13 weeks pregnant, we'd make them wait several weeks and we'd bring them back for saline abortions. These aren't done anymore, but suffice it to say that these women had to go through labor. and it would typically take them anywhere from 8 to 36 hours to deliver their usually dead children. But hey, I was pro-choice. I'm there to learn my trade. And every doctor, abortionist or not, wants the same thing: happy, healthy patients. It was during my first year of training. I was working at night, and I went down to the cafeteria for a break, and a young, attractive nurse came and sat down next to me. It was a lady who, a year later, became my wife. New York State, where we were working, had legalized abortion 3 years before Roe versus Wade. And she was pro-life, and she was approached during her training and asked if she would assist at those abortion procedures, and she said absolutely not. She would have nothing to do with them. Now, she wasn't getting into obstetrics, so as far as she was concerned, that was the end of it, until we met. Now, obviously, we're dating, and we found out pretty quickly we're on opposite sides of this issue. And early on in our relationship, we made a very fundamental and frankly stupid mistake. Instead of talking about it, instead of hashing it out, instead of reaching some kind of understanding, we ignored it. And the problem with that, of course, is when you ignore one important subject, it's easy to ignore other important subjects. We got married, and like a lot of young people, we wanted a family of our own. But found out pretty quickly she wasn't getting pregnant. We had an infertility problem. I sent her to the best infertility specialist in town. Any woman in this room who's been through an infertility workup knows that it is difficult, painful, embarrassing. And she would come home from those visits, lock herself in the bathroom, and cry, because two ironies were not lost on her. One, here she is married to an OBGYN and she can't get pregnant. Two, here she is trying to have a baby and her husband's killing babies and abortions. But as soon as that thought came in, she'd push it out. Her doctor told us there was one more operation he could try. It should take about an hour and a half. But when he walked out of the operating room 4.5 hours later, he came to me and he said, "Look, I never tell anyone that they're not going to be able to have a child of their own, but don't count on it." We were devastated. We both came from big families, and having children was something we wanted to do. After we got over that shock, we decided, okay, if this is the way it is, we'll adopt a baby. We'd be happy to adopt a child and take care of that child as our own. And anyone who's tried to adopt it maybe knows how difficult that is. We went to religious agencies, we went to state agencies, we went to county agencies. We were everywhere we could. And the best we could do after months of effort was to get on a 5-year waiting list to get on the actual waiting list. It was during that time that I had my first doubts about abortion. I said I was dedicated, but this was a weird existence. During the day, as part of my work, I'm doing abortions on a regular basis, but at night when I go home, I'm looking for one more phone number to call to try to find a baby to adopt. And I'm not an idiot. I know why there are so few babies to adopt. It's people like me doing abortions. And I remember even a particular case in the middle of doing a suction D&C abortion and thinking, gosh, I'm throwing these kids in the garbage. Wouldn't even one of these women allow us to take her child home to care for as our own? But of course, it doesn't usually work that way. And it was during that time that I came up with what my wife still credits as the best idea I've ever come up with in our relationship, other than asking her to marry me. And that was, this is crazy. We're getting nowhere with the normal channels. I know 50 obstetricians on a first-name basis. Let's advertise. Let's let them know that we're looking for a baby. And maybe some kid will fall between the cracks and we'll be able to get a private adoption, and that's what we did. Months later, in August of 1978, I was working in the operating room, and the circulating nurse came, tapped me on the shoulder, and I turned around, and she was holding up a piece of paper that said, "Call Marcia as soon as you're done." Well, Marcia was the head of social services at our hospital, at the University Hospital where I was working, and she's one of the people that I talked to. That's all the note said, but I knew what it meant. And sure enough, when I called her, she informed me there was a 15-year-old girl in labor in the delivery room. She'd had no prenatal care. The first time she saw a doctor was the day before. But now she's in labor, she's healthy, it looks like her parents took good care of her, the baby looks healthy, she wants to give her baby up for adoption. Are you interested? Well, of course I was interested. I remember staring at the face of the telephone to call my wife with this news and know that I was just 7 digits away from becoming a father. And literally, by the grace of God, we were able to adopt a little girl that we named Heather in August of 1978. Fantastic. Now we have a baby. And after all the years, and after all the tears, and after all the doubts, we've got a baby of our own, and my wife got pregnant the very next month. And our son Sean was born in July 1979. Now, Sean and Heather were figuratively and literally close. They were only 10 months apart. And anybody who didn't know Heather had been adopted would look at the two of them and go, golly, 10 months apart, you didn't give your wife much of a break, did you? But hey, I've got a proverbial millionaire's family. I've got a son and a daughter. And any doubts I had about abortion simply evaporated, and I went back to business as usual. I graduated from my residency program in 1980. We moved to the west coast of Florida from upstate New York. We found out pretty quickly that a young couple with young children didn't belong in a retirement community. So we left Florida, and I went back to upstate New York and set up practice with a physician that I had trained with. Now, Bill and I were practiced abortionists. We were not running an abortion clinic. This is a regular OB/GYN office like pretty much every woman in this room has been to at one time or another. But abortion was a part of our practice. And those of us in the abortion industry in the early 80s were looking for a better method of second trimester abortions, the ones between 13 and 24 weeks or so. The methods that we've been using, that saline abortion that I talked about, was difficult, painful, dangerous, very difficult for patients, very difficult for staff, expensive because of the long hospital stays and having to go through labor. We wanted a method of second trimester abortion like D&C. We wanted a method where the patient would go to sleep, and when she woke up, it would all be over. And that's when suction D&E abortions were developed, the one that I described. And they said there were a lot of physicians in Albany, New York, who were doing abortions, but nobody wanted to touch that procedure. It was tricky. And you hear this, and it's absolutely true. The farther along in pregnancy you do an abortion, the more dangerous it is. And we saw an opportunity. So we trained ourselves to do these late-term abortions, and as a result, we were not only doing them on our own patients, we were doing them on other patients that were being referred to us. Over the next 4 years, I did 1,200 abortions. Over 100 were the late-term abortions that I talked about. But hey, life's good. Kids are growing. We can finally afford a house. We can finally afford some furniture. And everything was just lovely until June 23rd, 1984. June 23rd was a Saturday. Heather was exactly 2 months away from her 6th birthday. Sean was just a few days away from his 5th birthday. I was on call that day. It wasn't very busy, and I made rounds and then got to spend the rest of the day with my family. We took the kids to an amusement park that afternoon. We had dinner together, and the kids were playing in the backyard when we had friends come over for cake and coffee. And we were talking with our friends, and at 7:25 that night, we heard the screech of brakes out in front of the house. The kids had gone in the road. Heather had been hit by a car. She was a mess. We went out and did everything we could. I'm a doctor. I'm supposed to be able to save people's lives. My wife was an intensive care nurse. This was our work. It made absolutely no difference, and she literally died in our arms in the back of an ambulance that night. If you have kids, you may think you have some idea of what that might feel like. If you haven't been through this yourself, you have no idea. I hope you never find out. But what do you do after a disaster? You bury your child and you try to get back into your life. And I don't know how long it was after Heather's death, But I showed up at OR number 9 at Albany Medical Center just like I had over 100 times before for a second trimester D&E abortion. I wasn't thinking of this as anything other than routine, and I had other things on my mind. And I started that abortion, and I reached in with that sofa clamp, and I ripped out an arm or a leg, and I just stared at it, and I got sick. But when you start an abortion, you can't stop. Earlier, I talked about stacking up body parts at the side of the table. This isn't to gross out the nice people that came to the conference. When you do an abortion, you have to keep inventory. You have to make sure that you get 2 arms, 2 legs, and all the pieces. Because if you don't, your patient will come back infected, bleeding, or dead. So I finished that abortion. And for the first time in my career, after all those years and after all those abortions, I really looked at that pile of body parts on the side of the table. And I didn't see her wonderful right to choose, and I didn't see the $2,000 I just made in 15 minutes. I didn't see what a great doctor I was helping her with a problem. All I could see was someone's son or daughter. And it occurred to me in that moment that this patient had come to me figuratively, never literally, and said, here's $2,000, kill my son or daughter. And I was the kind of person that would look her right in the eye, take that money, and with no compunction at all say, sure, I'll do that. Needless to say, we were in a crisis. Our daughter was dead, and we were almost mourning separately because we had been drifting apart. I told you, if you don't talk about one important subject in your relationship, it's too easy to forget others and not do that. And we have been growing apart. And now with Heather dead, everything broke wide open. I was angry. I was hurt. I didn't just stop doing abortions. I knew why I felt bad. I'll get over this. I told you, I was dedicated. But my wife always knew when I had abortions scheduled the next day because I was a real bear to be around. I got into a blame game. It was the girl's fault for getting pregnant. It was the hospital's fault for allowing it. It was the nurse's fault for scheduling them. Everybody else's fault but mine. Isn't that the way it always is? And after a few months of that, my wife had it up to here. Now, I'm full-blooded Sicilian in my family, and she was full-blooded Irish, so trust me, we could have good discussions. And I didn't know it, but she had packed a bag, and she was 5 minutes away from walking out the door with my son. But she was going to have her say. And the first words out of her mouth were, "You stupid idiot." You know what? It's not the girl's fault. It's not the hospital's fault. And it's not the nurse's fault. It's your fault. If you're feeling so bad about this, why don't you just quit? Now, that was the opening salvo. She broke our unspoken rule. And that was the beginning of what turned into an hour-and-a-half conversation, not only about abortion, but a lot of other things too. And I'm glad that she didn't leave. And the next day I went to my partners and I told them I would no longer do any more second trimester D&E abortions. It was just too difficult. I would do the little ones, the suction D&Cs we did in the office. And for several months I soldiered on doing those. But a change had occurred that I couldn't take back. Once, you think doctors are so smart. We're no different than anyone else. Once you figure out here, not here, that killing a baby this big for money is wrong, it doesn't take you too long to figure out that it doesn't matter if the baby is this big or even this big. It's all the same. We talk so easy about, oh, it's just a choice. It's so easy to talk about someone else's life. What people so often forget is that today you're an adult. Once you were a child, you didn't look anything like you look today. Once you were a baby. Once you were just this big, but it was always you. So that's why I quit doing abortions. Get involved in the pro-life movement? Not a chance. You see, everyone in the abortion industry knows that all you pro-life people are kooks. I know this because CNN tells me so, and they would never lie to me. Several months after I stopped doing abortions, someone at our church invited us to a pro-life potluck dinner, and I laughed. And I said, why would I want to go to some pro-life potluck dinner with a bunch of kooks? I had an easy out. We had another engagement that night. But as it coincidentally happened, and I understand coincidences better now, the pro-life potluck dinner was on the road to where we were going. We had to pass it to get there. So I looked at my wife as we were driving, and I said, you know what, just for giggles, let's stop at the pro-life potluck dinner. We'll stay for 10 minutes and we'll walk out. So the ex-abortionist and his wife walked into a pro-life potluck dinner. It looked like a bad movie. Everybody looked up, the place went dead quiet. I had no idea these people knew who I was, but they did. And a lot of them didn't know I wasn't doing abortions anymore. I didn't take out an ad, I just stopped. Well, guess what? We spent an hour and a half at the pro-life potluck dinner. These people weren't kooks. They understood the medicine, they understood the law. They were giving their time voluntarily and sacrificially to stop what they saw as the worst human rights abuse of our time. And this impressed us, and we joined that pro-life group, Citizens Concerned for Human Life in Albany, New York. And it was sometime after that that I started speaking. Seth already broke the news. He took away my thunder. Roe v. Wade is dead. Yeah, great. So we won, right? Now we can sit back, pop a beer, and watch a football game, right? It's all over. Yeah, far from it. 67% of people in this country, they're telling us, they want Roe v. Wade back. Because I support Roe v. Wade. And most people have no clue what Roe v. Wade says. So the next time somebody says they're supporting Roe v. Wade, remind them that what Roe v. Wade and its companion case Doe said was basically, in this country, no one could stop any abortion at any time during pregnancy for any reason whatsoever. That's what Roe says. Do you really think 67% of people in this country actually support that? And the answer is heck no. So how bad is it? I'm going to show you a quick video from an abortion clinic in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Just a 6-hour ride from Phoenix, where I live. Watch this carefully. There's a quiz at the end. Run the video, please.
Dr. Boyd, Southwestern Women's Options. How may I help you?
Hi, I was hoping to schedule an abortion.
All right. What was the day of your last period?
It was like the middle of May, so like May 15th, probably.
All right, so it looks like we can do this for you, but it is going to be a week-long procedure. So if you're able to come next week, and we start this on the 12th, I'm going to be looking at a fee of $8,000.
Oh.
Now, are you still in your chair?
Oh, just barely.
Just barely. But what you also need to keep in mind is that every week that goes by, the fee goes up by another $1,000.
Well, we get is at your 27 weeks.
Oh, really?
Yep. So you're about a month, actually you're about a month off in how you thought.
Oh, wow.
To insert the injection, it's going straight into the sac and to the pregnancy. Okay, it's bottom down. It'll insert through the baby's bottom. Okay.
Okay,
if
so
it's head down, it'll be inserted through the head, through the cranium. If we can't catch it early enough, which it has happened. If you're feeling pressure, it's moving down or something coming out, the pregnancy coming out, then you'll want to unlock the door to the hotel room, get your cell phone and just sit on the toilet. You don't have to look at anything, you don't have to clean anything up or nothing. Just be on the phone with us, and you could stay on the phone with us until the doctor and nurse get there. Okay?
Oh, good. So just go in the toilet if I'm having leave. Okay.
Yeah.
And what if it does come out when I'm on the toilet?
Just, you don't gotta look down, you don't gotta do anything, the doctor and nurse will come take care of it. If you feel like it's too much to see any of it, then do not let yourself look at it.
Okay.
Just
Okay.
if you want to cover yourself, even with like a towel or something,
Okay.
go ahead.
If you're one of those lucky people that has no pain with contractions and all of a sudden you're like, something's coming out, you sit on the toilet
Okay.
and you call us and you unlock the hotel room and we come in and we take care of you.
If I'm on the toilet
Yeah.
and it pops out and it's in the toilet,
Yeah.
what do I do?
You would just sit there and you would stay there
Okay.
and you would not move until we come and get you.
Okay. I mean, I don't have to worry about like
You don't have to
taking
look
it
at
out or
anything. You don't
anything.
have to clean anything. You don't have to do anything.
Okay. You
Yeah.
will do.
We
Okay.
take care of everything.
You don't got to look at it. Is this legal? Yep, perfectly legal under Roe v. Wade. Not legal in Arizona anymore, where I live. But it's still perfectly legal. How much did this abortion cost? 8? She's 8 at 25 weeks. She's 27 weeks. How much did the abortion cost? $10,000. Can anything happen to a woman in labor? Yeah, that's why we do it in hospitals. Her blood pressure could get out of control. She could hemorrhage fast and a lot. She can get infected. And yet, for $10,000 cash, these caring physicians and nurses are going to allow a woman to labor alone in a hotel room and deliver her dead son or daughter into a toilet. If you came here today to be entertained and you're not ready to get out of your seat and do something, then this conference failed completely and utterly. So, I quit doing abortions. Big religious experience, right? The angels came down, right? No. I hurt. That's why I stopped. 1983. I'm doing abortions in my office and I see something that no abortionist wants to see. The local Christians are picketing my office. And people ask us all the time, like, what's it like when we're outside picketing? I'll tell you what it's like. We get a siege mentality. It's us against you kooks outside. It was during that time that I got a new patient. Her name was Susan. She didn't even come up to my shoulders. She was in her mid-30s, came in for a routine OB/GYN exam and a pap smear, nothing special. And when it was over, she said, "Can I talk to you?" And this happens frequently. Many patients won't tell you what's really on their mind till they develop some level of trust. So I looked at this lady and, said, "Can I help you?" And she blows me away when she says, "I'm here to give you a message that Jesus loves you. He cares about you. This is not what he had intended for your life to be an abortionist. Please stop." Now understand something. It's not like my wife and I never darkened the inside of a church before, but people who were demonstrative with their faith always made me uncomfortable. And I had one overwhelming thought when she said this, and that is, I got to hustle this kook out of my office as fast as I could, and I did. A year later, she shows up for her GYN exam and a pap smear. And when it's over, she goes, "Can I talk to you?" And I went, "Oh, no." Doctors listen to their patients. Believe me, I remembered what she had said. But in the intervening year, I had received at least 3 personal greeting cards from this woman, marked confidential with the message marked on the card. One time during the intervening year, I had arrived at my office and there was a plate of brownies sitting on my desk with a message tied to the brownies. How long would you evangelize someone who thought that you were nuts? She's not stupid. She knew what I thought. She kept that up for 7 years. When I stopped doing abortions, the partners were understanding at first. But when we got involved in the pro-life movement, this is not cool. We lost every friend we had. The phone stopped ringing, the invitations dried up. But God was very generous to us, very good. And he just filled our life with new pro-life friends, which was just fine with us. And a lot of those people had served as Christian witnesses and Christian examples for us as to what a Christian Bible-believing life was about. But I was hard-headed, as I told you. It took a long, long time. I left my practice in 1990, And abortion was the biggest topic, but it wasn't the only one. But as I said, I had started to speak sometime before that, a few years before, and I continued doing it after I left the practice. God put hundreds of people in front of us and really helped guide us, and we are eternally grateful to him for that. But there's one story I always remember. It was right after I left my practice, and this is 1990. This was 7 years. Like I said, she'd been conducting her war for 7 years. But I crossed over from New York into Vermont on a Saturday morning to give a presentation. It was a high school gymnasium, maybe 50 people showed up. And when it was over, this woman in her 70s came up to me, and she was being very sweet and chattering away at high speed. And, oh, thank you so much for coming and doing your presentation. And isn't it beautiful what Jesus is doing in your life? And I went, oh, God, another one. And I felt like a fraud. I didn't want this lady to think that I was something that I wasn't. So I looked at her and stammered like an idiot and said, well, ma'am, I don't feel about Jesus the way you do. I'll never forget. She stopped chattering. She looked up. She got a big smile on her face and said, he knows you, sweetie. He's going to get you sooner or later. And she walked away. And he did, very soon after that. The minister who brought us the last little bit of that journey didn't know any of this, but he'd had a lot of experience, and he said, you know, in my experience, a lot of people help you on the road to Christ. He had no idea. There were hundreds of them. And he said, you know what, it would be a great thing to go back and thank some of them. Well, the first person I thought of was Susan. As I said, she'd been keeping up her one-woman war for 7 years. So I invited her out to lunch, told her what had happened. She was very happy. And then I found out something that I didn't know before. She was one of those people picketing my office in 1983. And I would have never understood it then, but I understood now when she said, I cannot explain it to you, but I felt called to go to you specifically as my doctor and deliver that message. And I fought it. I didn't want to do it, but the more I fought it, the more I felt I had to do it. And so I did out of obedience. That is the power every single one of you has. We all talk about you can do anything with God behind you. And if I asked how many people in this room believe that, I'm sure all your hands would go up, right? Then start acting that way. We are in a war. We are in a war. And Roe v. Wade being down is a great thing, but it's far from the end. It's really only the beginning. How do you fight that war? There are a lot of ways. You walk in faith. You get your church activated. You get your pastors, and a lot of them are afraid to talk about this subject, As I said, if you don't get in off the chairs and actually do something, then this conference has failed. This is Washington State. It's a liberal progressive state. I know. I used to live in one. I used to live in 2 of them. Why do you think I'm living in Arizona right now? I'm not joking. Plus, I don't like cold weather. You fight this war in a lot of ways, and one of them is politically. And I'm sorry, I know there's Christians out there who are going to argue with me. We have no business in politics. Are you kidding? Are you kidding me? I am no fan of Donald Trump. I am not a fan of Donald Trump. He's got a lot of flaws, about as many as I have. No joke. And everybody else in this room, if you really want to think about it. But if it weren't for him, Roe v. Wade would still be the law of the land. Politics is the key. You've got a huge midterm election right now. People are activated. People on the other side are signing up voters and motivating them to get them out to vote because they are willing to fight to get their right to an abortion back. Are you willing to fight just as hard? You better be. The churches are the key. all of the churches and all of the denominations. If people who claim to be pro-life voted that way, if every church that said it was pro-life had its members 100% behind the pro-life movement and the fight for these kids' lives, abortion would have ended in this country decades ago. Decades ago. That's okay, till we can restart now. So, go out. Information's fine. Knowledge is good. Knowledge is power, right? Baloney. Knowledge without action is just knowledge. Get out. Get your churches involved. Get your pastors involved. Get politically active. You've got to work at this because the handful of people that are speaking in this conference cannot do it on their own. We need every single one of you. There are 34 abortion clinics in this state, and there's a shortage of sidewalk counselors. Right now, I'm standing up here looking at more than enough people to staff sidewalk counseling at every single one of those abortion clinics in Washington. Get out, get active, because you have no idea the lives that you will save. God bless you, and thank you for your attention.